I came up with that name because there's one thing to say it's for employment or something like that. It's not general enough to really encompass what my goal was of this group. And my goal is that anybody who's being hired, working with employers, that interchange with folks like that, and also people that are in-house who may be HR managers, I also want to open the door to those folks to come to this group. So for those that you don't know me, I'm Forrest Blake. I'm the founder of Highrise Networks. It's been 9 years now. And the goal of this group is a little different than the traditional geographical groups of Highrise. This group's goal is to really be a true mastermind around HR, employment, and those sorts of things. And so the difference comes down to, we're going to spend a lot more time processing issues, your issues, knowledge transfer spotlights, which I'm excited to say we have, where is he here? Lost it. There he is, John. John's going to talk a little bit today about the gig economy and worker classification. But what I found in running these types of groups for CEOs is there's a lot of magic that happens. There's a lot of information that's shared, and there's a lot of amazing friendships that also come out of this. And we see those benefits every single month. And so what we're going to do is, this group's really about staying informed, forming valuable connections, cross-pollinating ideas. It's obviously a supportive environment, safe to share experiences, and then inspiration and motivation to do some of the things that we may not be doing in the past. We do like to have accountability partners. Once we have the group formed up, each person will have one person, and we rotate that every quarter. And the idea there is that anything you've committed to or you want to commit to your accountability partner, their job is to keep you on that task during that quarter on a half-hour call each month. So that is the idea of the group. I do want to say, if you want to add in your specialty, you're welcome to do that on your name there. I'm going to go ahead and add where I'm from here. And let's see what else in housekeeping here. So as we go through the topics, the first time you speak for the topic, and they are called roundtable discussions because we are going to get everybody involved, is just please tell us your name and what you do briefly, so that way we get to know you a little bit better. And one thing I did miss in difference for this group than our geographical groups is, we know that you're going to potentially do business together and have referrals, but that's not the primary objective here. The primary objective is sharing great ideas, holding each other accountable, and discovering something maybe we didn't know from before. So with that, let's dive into the first topic. And that topic is something that I've been hearing a lot about, and I know you guys have experience with it, which is solving this employee lack of motivation. Some people said a year ago it might be a COVID hangover, but now it's another year beyond that, and we're still seeing in some of our places that we work for, and certainly our own employees, this kind of lack of motivation. So if you'd like to speak, either do raise hand or do the fancy thing on Zoom. Either way, I can see you. So who would like to kick us off with solving employee lack of motivation? Aaron, you kind of did this, so that means I think you're just brushing off your nose, but Aaron, I'm going to call you out here.
Call me out. Solving lack of motivation. I do hear this a lot from my clients. By the way, I'm Aaron May. I'm president of Better Fit Benefits. We do employee benefits for clients nationwide. Solving motivation. I think for most of my clients, getting employees back into the office has been motivating for a lot of their workforce. Working from home, being disconnected from their managers and other staff, I think has caused a lack of motivation. The only real turnaround that I've seen from clients is when they've, put back in force having to have employees in the office. I think that's what has worked for some of them. I don't have too much insight into anything outside of that.
So you're saying bringing them back in the office is creating a little more motivation because they're now sitting with each other and holding each other accountable. You can't hide when you're in the office.
Yeah, and they get motivated by other people working hard, right? Especially in the sales and marketing sectors, when they see their, their coworker closing deals, selling, working hard next to them, that creates that little positive jealousy and motivation, that competition that you just don't get from working by yourself at home.
Love that. There's a reason we go to the gym, right? We want to work out with other people that are working out. Love it, Aaron. Thank you. Warren, go ahead.
I'm gonna most likely take a different tack.
Okay.
Purposely. How many clients or customers that we have work with their employees from the bottom up to ask them what motivates them, and how do those clients structure the work environment to respond to what motivates those employees. And I say that from experience, in that anytime I've worked with clients and customers, I've taken a bottom-up approach, and I've asked employees, I've asked clients to talk to us about why they come to work, what's attractive about this company, what would they like to accomplish, how could we restructure or structure the work environment to be more productive for them, etc. I found that too many employers do not ask those questions, and as a result suffer from turnover, low retention, etc. Money is not the root, solution. It's certainly a major factor, but not addressing what excites your employees I think is a major challenge for employers, whether they're hybrid, remote, or in place. So simply setting up a structure to ask them and then following through on that.
Great. Thanks, Warren. Back to the basics, right? Let's find out what the customer wants. And if the customer is the employee, let's make them happy. I love it. Monica.
I was going to say the same exact thing that Warren said, is that each individual employee is motivated by different things. So you have to find out what that is in order to motivate them. You'd be surprised. Very few people are motivated by money. I like money. That's what motivates me. Not everyone's motivated by that. So you got to find out what that is.
Thanks, Monica. Zena. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was going to co-sign on basically everything that Warren and Monica are saying. I think it's critical that, number one, you have the right people in the right seats and you're assessing them, like with someone like Monica, to ensure that they're motivated because they're in the right job, right? And I agree, every individual is unique, whether they're motivated for promotion, money, flex time, benefits. It is very individualized and it's very cultural. So it's not a one size fits all solution. There's something called the Gallup cards. I don't know if you've heard of them. They've been around for a million years, but they're a great tool. It looks like a deck of cards, and it's a really great tool for figuring out how to motivate people and what their individual indicators are, so that you can sort of cater to those. Having normal check-ins so that you can figure out before you get to a turnover or a lack of motivation what the problem is. I think we will have turnover because people are being forced to go back to the office. I think some people can't wait, but they're probably going into the office anyway. But I think overall, we also have a situation with the Gen Zs where they've finished high school and college remotely. They haven't been going into an office. And so it's like, we're going to have to, as a employer society, figure out how to handle people who have just grown up without you know, these baby boomers and the Gen Xer and the millennial mentors to sort of show them driving, motivating factors. Not everybody's competitive, and there's still the factor of like 10% of the workforce or 10% of your staff is like contributing to like the majority of the work and the successes within your company, but you still need the people there you're paying to contribute. So I think it's like a multiple part problem and solution, but anyway, just agreeing with Warren and Monica.
Yeah, love that. And it's a big population to keep happy, right? You've got the age gaps are enormous these days. So it's interesting. It's harder than ever, I think. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd echo everything that everybody has said. Also, um, you know, company's culture motivates people a lot. So, you know, I think a lot of business owners I meet with don't seem to understand how important their company culture is. I mean, that's kind of why people get up and go to work at your place of business versus your competitors down the street. And every company has a culture, but it's either by default or it's by design. And so there's a big culture component to, you know, motivating your workforce, especially the younger people. Younger people are not quite as motivated, you know, simply by financial gain. They want to work somewhere where they're passionate about what they're doing. Another big driver for especially the Gen Z folks is, you know, does the company align with their personal values? Are they, you know, working towards goals that matter to them on a societal level? All of these things are very important to the younger, you know, workforce. And that's why you see so many corporations really leaning into, you know, climate change initiatives and sustainability and, you know, whatever else anybody cares about. I'm old school. I'm very money motivated. So I don't fully, you know, understand all of it, but I would say that that's probably another big driver for motivation.
Well, you're in client work, but your primary job is to go find new people and you eat what you kill. So that's that salesperson, you know, mentality. You can't be passive. You have to be somewhat money motivated because I'm sure a lot of your comp is based on bringing in money, right? So awesome, Mark. Now I decided I'm putting in the chats, as people speak, I'm just putting your bios. And if you are a Highrise member, you can, if you're logged in, you can get all the information and email and such if you want to connect with somebody. So I see Monica is online. And that's something else. I don't want to change the flow, but just for a second, I want to show you guys this. So if I was a Highrise member, I would be logged in all the time because your face is up here on the top of the Highrise website. So if you go over here and you say, oh, Monica's here, great. I can go over and click on her profile. So it's kind of like a live networking situation. So just while I thought about that, it's a great tool. Why not be visible, right?
Do I win a prize for being online?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I'll send it to you. Unfortunately, the mail doesn't work here in Costa Rica very well. So you'll see it about 2026. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with, excuse me, I agree with everybody. We've been interviewing, I'm a lawyer in Los Angeles, and we've been interviewing a lot recently. And so we get a lot of, why are people leaving their firm or interested in coming to our firm? That's sort of the question, sort of my question. I always ask it. And the one thing I have heard more and more of is isolation. And sometimes, in many cases, it's COVID related. They want me to work at home or only come in 2 days a week. So I really don't have a sense of, you know, who I work with. And I feel like I'm twisting in the wind by myself. But others feel the isolation even when they're in the office. And I think, going back to, I think as Aaron that was saying, people want community. They want to come to work and get to know their coworkers and, and yet everyone's an individual. I've interviewed several people who want to work, want to live in Ojai, which is, 2 hours away, and come in kind of rarely, and are much more comfortable working at home. And the companies I've worked with, I've seen people, the problem with working at home is turning off. And some companies are very good at not letting people or not being supportive of people turning off their computer, or when there's the end of the day. They're expected to be available 24/7, 365. And that leads to burnout too, I think. I'm not sure why people leave us. They do. What we find out with worker motivation is when we look back, people have really left 2 weeks before they tell us that they've left. They just kind of stopped doing their work. And because they're working remotely, it's harder to figure it out the same way you would have, just 5 years ago.
Yeah, great point. And I think the other question then becomes, I always think about this with my wife who works as an employee for a large private company. When she's asked to respond to emails and work, she's in accounting, so she has deadlines, 14-hour days. So, I think that's probably going to cause some issues too, with this work at home situation. Speaking of employment law, Peter.
I come at this, I guess, as an employment lawyer from from the back end of things, right? I mean, nobody calls me to think to go and do it. So, and I think, I'm not going to bag on my clients and say that they have particular problems, but, I do think that, there is an issue with, current levels of management not really understanding how remote work works, how hybrid works, and how to manage somebody in those situations, because, they didn't come up under that system. And so, the tweens or whatever they call it, the young kids, they're not motivated, yada, yada. But, how good of a job is management doing in terms of figuring out how to keep track of employees, how to utilize their time efficiently, how to manage, how to check in, versus, thinking it's a good idea to have, a midday Zoom call that lasts for an hour where everybody comes in and, and says hello to each other. And then you think, I'm an effective manager because I saw everybody's face on the screen that day. And, and really trying to drill down to, how do I, under these change circumstances, adapt to what I have to do to engage with employees and keep track of them, and where I see it is just these situations where there's a fight over whatever it might be, and you go to look for the records. Oh, this person was underperforming. Okay, well, where was the meeting? Where was the notice? Where was the, 5 years ago wouldn't be an issue, right? You'd have a well-papered file. And now it may be because of lack of face time. And I think I'm starting to have, see tougher and tougher situations, just based off of that lack of documentation and lack of follow-up. And I'm sure that some of it just has to do with, culture change. You're not really thinking about it in the same way, but you're also not effectively managing. And yeah, you're leaving people on an island and you make them feel like their time's wasted, or that they're not going to have a chance to develop properly because of lack of supervision. And, of course they're going to leave and try someplace else. Yeah, I guess we can blame them, but I'm not sure that that's always the right answer.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, we work with I have a lot of HR consultants that work with my clients. And one of the things that, turnover has been a challenge for most of our employers, that regardless of the industry. And what we have found is that a lot of employees, it depends. So geographically, maybe where they're located, what part of the country, but also their generation, their socioeconomic environment, because some are motivated. I work with a lot of financial institutions. They'll go be a teller at another financial institutions for $1 more an hour. I mean, as far as they're concerned, they're not loyal to anyone. But what we've also found is that a lot of employees leave employers because they do not feel like their immediate manager cares about them or their well-being or nurturing. And the other thing is that employees also that don't feel like they understand where the company's going or what their role is and opportunity for advancement, they don't feel like they matter. And that's a big part of it, is psychologically. How do we make them feel included, but also provide some clarity on what is the company's goals? Where are we going? Short, mid-range, and long-term goals, and how do they fit in? Is there a path for advancement? Also, I think part of it is I work for a private company, 17,000 employees, over $4 billion. And we're starting to make people now come back into the office because we feel the teamwork is something that is lacked. And we've seen, as far as the retention of clients has been impacted, because again, when you're working as a cohesive team, and you're celebrating victories, but you're also there to support each other, because we all know what absenteeism, and that's a reality that we all face in our workforce, right? And in our jobs, is that, hey, we're all going to have a bad day, maybe one a week, but we've got that cohesive team gelling and working as one to pick that person up who's having a rough day. So I think that, those are what we find are really impacting the turnover, and the cost of hiring is immense. These recruiters will know a lot better than me, but that's what our data shows us, and so that's all I have. Thank you. Appreciate everyone's input. Glad to be here.
I'm going to go to Britt next. Go ahead, Britt.
Yes, hello everyone. I guess I have some explanation for why I have these empty, bookshelves behind me. We're renovating our space, and I've got to be out of here by Friday so they can tear down my part of it. So it's it looks depressing, but it's not depressing. Anyway, I'm a local government attorney in Illinois, and we made it through COVID with the same bumps and bruises everyone had, but we came through it, I think, a little better off. Our meetings, our public meetings, have all gone from being remote back to being in person, and I think the employees and staff of our governments have caught on the same way, and so everyone's back at their desks and they're motivated. But at the same time, we've found a middle ground of between remote work and in-person work, and that has helped a lot. We found a lot of people who became very motivated by being at home 2 days a week and being at the office 3 days a week, and suddenly, particularly with our secretarial and administrative, it was just a boom. And so our office has made it a permanent thing because it worked. We were still billing. We were actually billing more during the pandemic than we had the year before. And I speaking personally, I think that's because a lot of us like working from home and enjoyed billing from home. But but it just carried over. And now the staff gets to reap the benefits from that too. And we had problems like everyone else with COVID, but I think we came out better for it. And my anecdotally, hearing from other employers, they've caught on the same way. I think the people left behind are the ones who are still doing it the way they did it in 2019. They didn't, many attorneys I know, particularly on the plaintiff or claimant side, just decided never to change what they were doing. They just kept working,
Right.
and all their staff kept working. And I think they're worse off for it because everyone likes some flexibility, everyone. So now it's part of our office policy. And that's my personal experience with it. And I know from my own staff that they've become motivated because of the new post-COVID policies we have working at home.
Awesome.
So,
Thanks. Good luck with your reconstruction there.
Thank you.
That'll be fun. Yeah. They'll probably give you a new 8x8 office. I know how the lawyers are going these days.
Or a 5x5. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever you can stand in and work. Yes. Awesome. Brian, I haven't heard from you. What are your thoughts around this subject?
Well, luckily for me, I've always had old people working for me, so the young people stuff that people were talking about doesn't matter. I made a couple of notes, and I know some people that are young, they graduated during the pandemic, I guess, and they've mainly worked from home. And it surprises me how little the companies are requiring them to do. A lot of them could get done what's required in half the day. It's not a bit, and I'm like, don't they know how much more they could push you? Now, the feedback I hear is, nah, you can't work people that hard. No. But and then I think what also I've noticed is some of what they are doing is below what they could be doing. Now, maybe everybody does that in the early years, but I'm thinking that maybe since they're doing work that's beneath them that they a long time ago learned how to do, maybe they're not so motivated at work. Because that was your first question, right? Why aren't they motivated? And then the last thing I was thinking about is with the situation they're in, it's all about work. Where when I remember getting out of school and I worked in downtown and I parked in a parking lot, I took a subway over to a certain part of downtown. You walk to downtown, you saw the same people on the subway every morning. You talk to them, you might see them at lunch. At work, you were with people, we socialized. So half of work wasn't work. It was just the fun of seeing you and her and him and talking and socializing.
Yeah.
Where when they're working in a, from home, it's the work. It's you and the work. So maybe it's just lends itself to being less motivated, unless you're doing something that you love, where you're making a boatload of money or something like that. But if you're doing some mundane task that you figured out how to do 2 years ago, and it's just you and golly, I could understand it. And whereas, when I was younger, you would have been at work and you might not even care because your friends were there, and half of going to work was the people.
Great point.
So
Point.
that's about all I think I can.
And Brian, I being a commercial real estate broker for many years, I truly believe that being together in an office is much more valuable for all kinds of reasons, productivity. Well, Brian, you remember back when we were all going to start telecommuting and working from home, that didn't work either. Everybody came back at a certain point. So I think we're just in this strange time where we've gone there, but I think ultimately there's going to be a good mix of both. And we're starting to see a little bit of that now. I mean, I like people. I like to be around people.
I mean, I've always been in a situation where I could work from home or
Yeah.
wherever I wanted to. But when the pandemic started, I moved home. I was there for one day, and the city told me that I was essential, and I would move back to the office. So
There you go.
there was only one day where I was planning on working from home all the time.
Yeah. So Andrew, I don't think we've heard from you yet. What are you or your clients doing to keep the employees motivated and getting the job done?
I think that primarily, I guess brief introduction, Andrew Caton, employment side or management side, employment attorney, a lot like John and Peter. I think that, really, I think for an employer motivation thing is, I guess I look at it a little bit like on the sales side, it's kind of like what makes, if you're a salesperson, what makes someone buy a product, right? Then it's a matter of what motivates someone to work, right? What are the things that engage that person, right? Is it recognition? Is it money? Is it, some other fringe benefit that motivates that person to engage and add value? It's all a very personal thing to each employee, and the trick as a manager is to identify that, right, and appeal to that particular motivating factor. It's like, why does someone buy a product or service? It's because, right, it's all very unique to that person. And so I think the trick in management is simply to understand what motivates your employees. So unfortunately it's not a cut and dry, one size fit all kind of a thing. Unfortunately it takes a lot of effort, with your frontline managers to engage those employees, and find out what motivates them individually.
For sure. Thank you. We have a couple of people. Prosper, are you here with us? Do you have anything you want to comment? I don't know if that's your first name. That's pretty cool if it is. I'm going to change my name to Prosper. It'd probably make me more motivated. I'm not sure. Okay, I don't think anybody's there. One thing, I'll just make a couple of comments and we can have a little open dialogue and then we'll move to our next topic. Is KPIs, key performance indicators. I know you're big on that, Aaron. It seems like if you're not going to see this person on a daily basis, they need to know exactly what they've got to get done and what you're measuring them against. We had an individual who came to us and said, a few of you are lawyers, and they said, I don't understand. We're bringing on clients, but we're not turning them into revenue. And he was using outsourced providers to do the intake of these new clients. And he's a personal injury attorney. So lots of calls, lots of intake. And when we dug down into it, and this is a type of thing we'll do in this group as we go forward, once we have a core group, when we dug down into it, he had motivated his staff, bonused them on bringing on new clients, not on getting a revenue result at the end. So his average client to revenue dropped by 30%. So it was simple, but all he did is change the way that he compensated them and said a portion of it's due to the coming on board. The other portion is due on revenue being produced at a certain level. It jumped back up 10% in 2 months. So I think we have to be very careful with what we put out in our expectations, and those folks that do counseling of employees. Also, when they're not fulfilling those needs, how do we help them to get there for their reasons, not our reasons? So a couple thoughts on that from my perspective, just as being an employer. And I would say, my old concept of the beatings will continue until morale improves. I kind of stopped that, but that's where I'm coming from. I'm a pretty tough employer, but I've learned over the years not to be that way. But with my commercial real estate background, it's easy to do. Well, awesome. Hopefully that was helpful. The next topic, which is kind of running right into some of our employee recruiters here, is what is the best way to hire? And I think we've already touched on retention, but we can expand on that a little bit. And retention, and we have about 25 minutes for this topic. So who would like to kick us off? And Monica, I'm gonna call on you because I know that the first step of retention is making sure you have the right people in the seat. So what are your thoughts on bringing
Yeah, I
that?
think Zena mentioned it. You can benchmark any kind of job. So let's say you're hiring for a VP of sales. You can look at certain aspects of that job and those responsibilities and match them with the right type of communicator. So the DISC looks at how we communicate. That's one of the assessments we do. And so if I'm hiring a VP of sales who's face to face with clients, also managing employees, they're probably going to need to be able to connect with people, right? So on the DISC, that's an IRS, and they're probably going to need to get things done quickly. So that's usually a high D style. So task oriented and people focused, kind of a mix for that job. But like I said before, maybe this is on the other group. If I'm hiring an accountant, that person needs to be very detailed, right? I would never hire a DI to be my accountant unless I wanted to lose money. Like I need someone C style or very analytical, detailed. So those types of benchmarking can happen easily. It's automated. It's not, we can't use our gut to hire anymore. That's ridiculous. We have to use the data that's available to us.
And I think the other thing, which I did not do well at times, was we have to listen to the data. It's not just,
Absolutely.
you can read it and go, oh, no, I think they're great. And then you find out that high impression management is not the type of people. They're great on the surface because they talk well, they super friendly with people, but they're not going to tell you when things are going wrong.
Right. Yeah. And I think in order to really understand a person who's interviewing with you, you have to get past the actor in the interview, right? So how can you do that? There's a lot of different assessments. You don't have to use mine, but use some sort of psychometric assessment to get to know them better than what they say they can do. And this is good for not just the company. Obviously, you're going to get more productivity out of anyone who's like being themselves at work and naturally kind of enjoys the work that they're doing. They're going to always perform better. They're always going to last longer in the job. But it's also good for the individual candidate, right? You're going to help them find their dream job and really support that individual. So it's good on both sides to be able to benchmark any particular job for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Monica. Who wants to go next?
I'll jump in. I have, I think we've talked about so many of the standard things that come with creating the culture and hiring and finding out people, but some of the things that we sort of didn't go on, which really play to how to hire and retain, is when I think about our skills gap that we have right now. So, and I'm not sure if these are the exact numbers, but as an example, we have people that are lacking motivation, and we're talking about leadership, and we're talking about, them not being interested in the work that they're doing. So having someone hired in, especially when we look at the Gen Zers are going to be, I think, 30% of our workforce by the end of next year. So we have a skills gap, but we also have 4 million baby boomers retiring every year. So all the people that are in the workforce that are really leading the mentorship and the way of the company culture, especially in old school law firms or, old school accounting firms, and sort of that big corporate be in the office, there's a big disconnect, right? And so hiring people so that they can skill up towards an area in which they want to grow and really contribute and be passionate about once you know that they're going to be in the door, so that you can retain them and utilize them in a way that is beneficial to the company and also going to motivate them to want to stay with you. And then also having that workforce that's used to coming in and setting an example and mentoring and being able to drive that person to really be engaged and understand their contribution and why it matters that they're there and they're doing their job and they're contributing to their role. I think there's a big disconnect. And in order to really focus on hiring the right people, in addition to everything Monica said, but hiring people that are motivated, where they can have value and see the investment in who they are so that they can contribute and have a great mentor in place, is a huge thing of what we're going to need to see in the next decade especially with the people going out of the workforce and the people coming into the workforce. So.
Excellent. Joe and then Aaron. Joe, how much is employee benefits playing a role in today's environment for not only recruiting, but also retaining employees? And do you have any strategies that are working better than others?
We have a different process that we do, and we typically are working with clients that have at least 50 employees. But what we have done is a lot of times our clients may have 300 employees, but they're trying to poach someone from a company who has 10,000 employees. So what we have done is our plans that we build, we reward good stewardship. When I say good stewardship, what we do is if an employee or a family member on the plan buys in and they embrace the culture that the C-suite is established, and that is if you help us win, you win. We build plans that have no deductible for things like MRIs, for surgeries. We also build in quality metrics, so they're not going just to the lowest cost. It's in inverse with healthcare. Typically, the lowest cost surgeon for a knee replacement is probably someone who does 20, orthopedic surgeon does 20 knee replacements a month versus the one that does 2, right? It's because they've got the same OR, they've got the same anesthesiologist team, and they've got it down, right? And that drives down the cost because less OR time, less anesthesia time, the whole deal. And it's bundled payments. It's cash pay, basically. So if someone was on a United Healthcare plan, this is a real number. It may cost $60,000 for a hip replacement. They'll bill $120,000 for that procedure.
Wow.
But then they discount it to $60,000. Well, our preferred surgery centers with the best surgeons, we can get that same procedure done typically for $16,000 to $18,000. So again, we're building plans that reward good stewardship and a concierge because, again, most people have less than $500 in their savings or their checking account, right? So we build plans that people can use. But it's also enabled our larger employers to strategically build a plan where they can recruit and compete the same way that they can, a 10,000, 20,000 employer can. So, that is what is appealing to employees is it's unique, it's different, and they've never had it before, unless they're on an HMO. Certain parts of the country have that. We don't where I'm at. I'm in Texas, but we have groups all over the country. NASCAR teams, for example. We have a lot of NASCAR teams that, so normally what happens is once we establish some relationships in a region, then it just catches on. And then it's word of mouth. So anyway, we're very fortunate. We have some people a lot smarter than I that have created that process. I'm just the benefactor, and I can help a lot of people that defer healthcare or don't get it at all be able to get the care they need.
Love it, Joe. Great idea. Aaron, also in benefits, how are you helping employers either retain or get new clients?
A couple things first. Well said, Joe. I love those types of benefits as well personally, structuring it customizable for the employees. But I'm going to mix the two topics because I think this ties in a lot to what Warren, Monica, and Zeno were saying originally. It comes down to 3 main factors when you're structuring a recruitment and retention tool, particularly for companies based in California, where benefits are probably one of the most important things that a potential employee look at more so than many other states that I work in. First and foremost, it comes down to culture. You have to know what the employees want. Right. A lot of the employers that I educate on building benefit packages, they think, oh, just because this is expensive or because the deductible low or the copay is low, that the employees will actually appreciate their benefits, which more than likely they won't. Right. You got to tailor make it for each individual employee. And it starts with employee education and a survey, starting to just tap into trying to figure out the culture, what your employees actually want, and offering a buffet style a la carte benefit structure that allows each individual employee to pick the right plan that suits them and their family accurately. Right. The second part of it comes down to employee education, right? If employees, you can give an employee a $0 deductible plan that's $1,000 a month, contribute 100%. But if they don't actually understand their benefits, how can you expect them to appreciate them? So another thing, Joe, I'm sure you do that we also do is we go out there and we educate their employees all the way down to a one-on-one benefit seminar to make sure that we get the questions answered that they really want to ask and that they understand and now actually appreciate the benefits that the company is offering.
Mhm.
The third final thing comes down to branding. Well, we create custom benefit booklets with the company's logo, their tagline, anything else that they want to put in there, and actually hand out to the employees that they have something hard copy that they can take home with them that's from the company, branded, that's really showing attention to detail and appreciation of the employees. So that when they take that home with them, they talk it over with their family, talk it over with their friends. It looks very, very professional as opposed to just an online link or a quick phone call or anything of that nature. That ends up upping the benefits perception for an employee, just that extra step. Right. So it's employer education, making sure that the company owner themselves, the people that are actually paying for these policies, understand, because there's a disconnect. Right? For an employer, all they care about is, okay, how much is this going to cost me? You know, I'm paying all this money. My employees should understand. But when the employees don't understand and appreciate their benefits, then you're not going to have the full value of that recruitment and retention tool. Second thing is the customization, making sure there's multiple carriers, multiple plans, different styles, HSA, HMO, PPO, EPOs, different levels of dental, you know what I mean, vision, critical illness, voluntary benefits, all built into the package to make sure each employee is getting an option to pick something that they actually like. The third thing is making sure the employees understand it. So
Thanks, Aaron. Anytime you get something, I find that goes home to the spouse and it's considered by both, you're creating an extension. And the next time that employee says, hey, I'm not sure I want to be with this company. And the wife or the husband says, what do you mean? We've got great benefits. I remember one employer, I got hired by a commercial broker, and the day I got hired, he sent roses to my wife at the house saying, thank you so much for being a part of the decision to have Forrest join us. Phew, I couldn't quit that. I had to get a divorce to quit that job. So anyway, it's good stuff, bringing it home.
Could I just add one more thing if possible?
Yeah, sure.
Really, really brief. Having something in your hand, like a benefits booklet, either emailed or, you know, given to you at the office, is sometimes undervalued in the industry, because a lot of times employers aren't paying 100% of this. So employees do have to take, you know, money out of their paycheck, sometimes a decent amount, to pay for the benefits. And if you don't have something in your hand after the meeting or something to look at that's really nice, you know, branded, then the employee's like, what are we paying for? Right? Some of the employees will go the whole year without ever really using their medical insurance. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, our insurance sucks because it costs me $400 a month and I never use my insurance. You know, this is insane. This isn't good benefits. But when you actually give them something like a 15-page benefit book that's branded, they're actually getting something, you know, psychologically for their money. So they kind of start to understand what they're paying for and how good it is. And a lot of other employers aren't doing that. So that's going to set you apart from potentially your competition that's trying to hire your employee.
Awesome, Aaron. Thank you for the input. Who's next? So it's back to the question of how do we hire good people and then keep them? Who wants to add it next? Andrew, I saw you raise your hand to put your glasses on, so that that's the way we do it here at Highrise. You got anything to comment on, Andrew? I ask on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, no, there's nothing to comment on. I don't, for me, this isn't anything that's really in my wheelhouse for, you know, expertise or comment on.
Got it. Okay. Well, I mean, one thing I think about with employment law is that, you know, certainly getting on the hiring side, just making sure everything is tight, that they understand exactly what they're getting. You know, and part of that is that, you know, that's a retention tool. So when they come back and say, wait a second, I thought I had 35 days of PTO, right? And oh, I don't get an unlimited PTO? What are you talking about? So yeah, for sure. Yeah, Warren, what are your thoughts? Oh, Andrew, go ahead if you want to comment on that.
No, I just, for me, my experience and expertise really comes into play once, the relationship is mostly terminated, and it's trying to figure out. I mean, I guess you could argue, if you could keep employees happier, you're less likely to risk, subsequent litigation associated, with whatever termination occurs. But I think that at that juncture, things have sufficiently torn apart in the relationship that, something like benefits, I'm not sure is gonna, really resolve anything all terribly well. So, usually, where my expertise comes in is, there's been a rift in the relationship, there's a termination or an adverse action, and someone's really pissed off and upset that they're not getting what they want.
Yeah, exactly. Let me go to Warren first. I know he had his hand up and then I muted. Go ahead, Warren.
Thanks, Forrest. I'm venturing to bet by looking at the panel here that most of us have had 20 or more years of work experience. And it may be that we may not remember our entry into the workforce, either before or, after high school or after college. It was awful lot of uncertainty. We didn't know whether or not the employers that we selected or they selected us really were going to measure up to what some of us really hadn't defined yet for our career and our culture needs and environment. And I think it's helpful to keep that in mind. Employees have choices. There's a shortage of labor in the labor market. So employees coming into the workforce, the Gen Zs that we talk about in particular and older, they can choose companies more so than they have at any time.
Right.
So, what Aaron and Joe talked about are good ads. I think what's important too is understanding that when potential employees are checking out an employer, a lot of folks, young folks in particular, almost instantly go online and check out the company. If they have benefits, are they online? Are they immediately available to be reviewed? Younger folks, I look at my own children in particular and my niece's niece, within 60 seconds can tell you what a company is about, what it's doing, what it's not doing, and whether or not they're going to apply for a job there.
Amazing.
And that assessment we didn't have available to us when we started off work. So and then the disparity between different states, California, Utah, Massachusetts, and in my state, we have a very high minimum wage. It's less than half that in Utah. And I know that because my niece's daughter's staying with us for the summer. She's 19 going on 20. But these young folks, as they enter the workforce, have choices. And that's a huge issue with recruitment and retention. So what is that value add that we represent as employers? It's hard to define for folks coming into the workforce. I think it's easier to define for folks that are more well-established. If it's a job that's, my final comment, if it's a job that geographically won't require the potential employee from relocating, that's a huge plus for them and for the employer. But as a good example, employers on Cape Cod, my little peninsula south of Boston, can only expect to recruit from residents of the Cape. Why? Housing is not affordable. And, you know, affordable housing and realistic housing and transportation become key for recruitment and retention practices. So as we consider developing, you know, further answers on this, it's how portable are these jobs? How portable are our potential employees? It doesn't go away. I've got clients here that have 20% vacancies,
Yeah,
and they can only hire young folks in these particular positions who already live here.
thanks, Warren, appreciate it. John, and then Mark?
Hi, yeah, I'm gonna kind of go at this from a different perspective slightly.
Sure.
Not the benefits issue, which is not really, I don't know any more than anybody else.
Mhm.
From a legal lawyer perspective, first of all, I defend a lot of employers in employment matters. Most of them will tell me sooner or later, depending on a more senior person, oh, I knew this person was a problem at the interview. I knew we were going to have an issue. And it's like, well, then why'd you hire them? Oh, I needed somebody, and you know, they have the whole story, but they
Mhm.
always seem to know. The second issue, and this is something that just came up this morning in a case, is particularly if you're more of a mid-level, but not the beginning of the workforce, but the mid-level, somebody you're recruiting from another company. One thing as an employee, so to your original question, Forrest, this is vitally important, recruiting and hiring. The second issue as part of it is to make sure that the person's not taking trade secrets with them, that, you know, in California, it's not particularly an issue, but in other states, there's issues about covenants not to compete. And so when you hire somebody, you don't want to be hiring a lawsuit from their former employer. And in some cases, the lawsuit is how these companies do business with each other. They bash each other in the marketplace, and they steal employees from one another, and they bash each other in litigation. And that's just competition by another name. And other times it's actually real. And so, for example, this morning I got a call from a client. They got a threatening letter from someone's former employer that they're stealing trade secrets and stealing customers, and now they have a potential lawsuit. And they didn't have, the new client, they didn't have a good screening system to even be aware that that might be happening. Plenty of employers do know, and they prepare for it. And in those industries, they have to deal with it. But I think that's something, if we're talking to our clients, the hiring issue is crucial, and you can't just take the first person that walks in the door, even if you have, you know, a bad feeling. Well, if you have a bad feeling, probably for a reason. Secondly, you know, think through whether you're buying a lawsuit.
For sure. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Where did Mark go? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so getting the right person. I've seen a lot of employers recently just because there's so much competition for people in the workplace, and you know, there's 2 open jobs for every person every working age person in the country. So competition is pretty stiff. You know, I would say to make sure that you're hiring the right person, you know, you still got to do a thorough background check references, really put the time into verifying the story that the individual is telling you. Did they really go to the college that they said they did? Did they really get the GPA that they said that they did? None of those are really good indicators if somebody's going to be a good employee for your organization or not, but at least, you know, verifying that they are truthful up front and giving you good information, kind of going back to what John says. If you have a bad feeling about somebody, you haven't hired them yet. just don't make them an offer. Like, just say, I don't really have a good reason for disqualifying this candidate, but I don't have a good feeling, so I'm gonna keep interviewing some more folks. And I know that, you know, in larger organizations, there's pressure on HR and recruiting departments to put bodies in those seats. But you know, doing the work up front, there's other tools you can use as well to make sure that people are going to mesh with your culture. DISC profiles is a really big one. I know a lot of companies use those. What is that individual's communication style like? How are they going to blend with the other folks on the team? Do you have a lot of extroverts, and now that you've got this one introvert coming in, is it going to work? I don't know, but you got to try to, you know, do a little bit more work up front. You know, and you got to move quick. There's been some interesting research recently where, you know, if you're making people go through, you know, more than 2 or 3 interviews, you're probably going to lose them. And if it's a candidate you want, you're going to have to make the jump, and you're going to have to not put them through 4, 5, 6, 7 interviews. People are not going to go through that. They don't have to. Right. There was something else in it. I just lost it.
I'd like to introduce you to Monica. She does assessments in DISC. So you guys could connect up. Mark's with Insperity, so he's talking to folks all the time. I mean, that's awesome. I did want to share something, and then we're gonna move on just real quick. I was just curious, if I asked ChatGPT if somebody should work for Highrise Network, I got an interesting response. It didn't say anything about Highrise, but this is what I would think a conscious employee would want to know about, right? This is like a roadmap: culture, career growth, compensation, work-life balance, industry and job role, leadership, company size and structure. I mean, that's just, boy, who would have thought, right? Yeah, just some things there. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, there's something that Mark had just commented on that made me kind of spark some interest or some thought on me was, when it comes to that point of, you know, why you did or did not hire somebody, right? You know, I didn't have a good feeling about that person. I would, at the risk of giving legal advice to this large community, I would say that be very careful how you go about that. Only because those kinds of phrases are often dog whistles for discrimination. And so I would say, if someone doesn't qualify, meet your standards, I would work hard to give that as tangible a reason as you can, besides, I just didn't feel good about that person. Because if they have a protected class, you're really risking a potential lawsuit.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. So there's 3 components to each one of these meetings. Once we have an established group, we will have a roundtable discussion, and then we'll have somebody that signs up for a question that they bring to the group that they'd like to either deal with their own situation with their business, or it could also be a general topic as well. And then the third component is a knowledge transfer spotlight, which is very similar to what we do in our geographical groups in Highrise. So today, John, our fearless employment lawyer, decided to offer his advice. We're going to go about 50. I know we could go on about this for hours. We're going to go on for about 15 minutes, couple questions and answers, and then we'll wrap up and get you guys out of here at the half hour. So John, tell us what your thoughts are, especially around the gig economy. And
Well, thanks.
yeah.
I apologize at first. Forrest told me not to do a PowerPoint, not to and then we kind of agreed on this potentially huge subject, and to keep it somewhat national in scope. So one of the issues, and it's actually kind of relevant to our group, is the first question you have to ask is, are you an employer or are you hiring an independent contractor? And it's gotten a lot of press recently. There was a case out of the Ninth Circuit on Monday related to California AB 5, which is a test for determining whether somebody is properly classified as an independent contractor or an employee. I'm going to use the word worker to sort of to do both, because I represent a lot of people and they often will call their independent contractors employees and their employees contractors or team members. It is it's fraught. And this has been something that's been going on actually for well over 100, 150 years. There's nothing really that new about the gig economy, except it's a new concept for old tests, which is pretty common in law. And it has, there's probably right now, I looked this up, that there were 64.6 million independent workers in the United States, which are people that are not employed by a company, and they do everything. And you can debate, and there are debates, and I'm not going to get into the debate right now, as to whether that's by choice, whether it's by circumstances. California legislature has clearly stated that they believe employers make people independent contractors to avoid paying taxes, avoid providing employment. And quite frankly, the California legislature thinks it's a bad thing. And that's the wave going across the country right now. It's not just California. But even in California, there are multiple tests depending on the circumstance. There's tests for, the tests go back, and they have a lot of different types of tests. But before I get to that, I forgot something. Why does this matter? It matters for a lot of reasons. Whether a worker is an employer or contractor relates to overtime pay. Independent contractors don't get it. Employees do. Healthcare benefits. Usually contractors don't get it. Workers' compensation, other employment laws. In California, we have mandatory rest breaks, meal breaks, other types of issues. None of that applies. Also relates to taxes, how you pay taxes, whether you have to withhold taxes, who's responsible for paying taxes, who pays the Social Security taxes and the quote employer share. So the government's concerned they're losing money. Labor unions. Can you be in a labor union if you're an independent contractor? Really, no. One of the defining features of a labor union is to be an employee. But just because the person who hires you calls you a contractor doesn't make that true. And so the root question is always, is this person an employee? Is the person, and it ultimately gets down, and there's a gazillion tests, but ultimately the most important one tends to be control. And you need to look in your state. California is public and out there, but it's not alone. New Jersey has lots of rules. The federal government has lots of rules. And these tests range in, initially there was the restatement of law of agency, which created a 10-part test with 11 further questions to consider after you go through the 10-part test. There's, again, under those tests, it was really, looking at community custom and the control over the occupation. And the California Supreme Court, when they looked at it, drew the comparison of, if you have a factory and you hire a plumber to fix a broken toilet, that's clearly a contractor. You don't control them. You come in, say, fix the toilet. They charge you maybe by the hour, maybe by the piece. However they do it, you don't even know what they're doing. They fix the toilet, they give you a bill, and they leave. That's the classic independent contractor. Problem is, most of the time you're dealing with it, it's far different. I knew a while back, I dealt with an employer, seemed to fire almost all their employees and hire them all back as independent contractors, basically as a cost-saving measure. And that was a real problem. So the issue is control. And the courts are going to look at it basically what it is on the ground, not what you say in your contract. They're not going to, contract may or may not be, it's evidence, but it's not the end of the world. And people think that. And what's the relationship and how does it? And even in California, where we seem to have made it, everybody an employee, there's always statutory issues that take you out of it. Certain real estate professionals, doctors, other types of people are by law outside of the independent contractor relationship. So I guess if you leave with nothing else, look at your state, look at the reason you're asking, whether it's tax law, whether it's the NLRB and union law. Look at the employment, and you need to ask this question essentially with every independent contractor that the employer might have. And the benefit of the test in California, and people may have heard of it as AB5, they may have heard of it as Dynamex. Basically, Dynamex was a case that had this test. AB5 made it responsive to all of the basically as sort of if there isn't another test, this is the test. And then we had Prop 22 in California, which took Uber out of it. Is relatively simple and very skewed towards finding employment. And it's not just California. This test, the ABC test, is in 16 other states: New Jersey, Massachusetts, Alaska, and many others. And that test, and I'm going to tell you it because it's the easiest, is the worker free from control and direction of the hirer in how they perform their work, both in having a contract saying they're free, like this plumber that I raised, and in the practical realities of the situation. Second, does the worker perform work that is usually outside the course of the hiring entity's business? Now in California, that's almost in every case where I'm dealing with somebody who says that they want to classify someone as an independent contractor. That particular factor falls down because a salesperson is part of your business. You can't do your business without sales. Take a law firm, lawyers, paralegals, secretaries. They all are essential parts of that entity's business. And then finally, you look at whether it's an independent trade or occupation or something where there's a business. There's other cases, the NLRB for a long time looked at whether the person sort of has their own business, like the plumber who you call up when the toilet's broken. They probably have their own business. Uber and Lyft and Postmates are a little different in this because they kind of have their own business. They kind of make their own hours, but at the same time, they're kind of controlled by Uber, Postmates, and Lyft. There's way too much for me to get into on different issues, but
John, you wanna open it
I
up?
want to have questions, and I guess it's supposed to be more of a discussion than sort of my just talking at you. I've done a 2.5-hour presentation for HR professionals on independent contractor versus employers that I did, about 4 months ago. So this is a big topic.
Yeah, thanks, John, for the overview, though. Any questions for John? I know we did this quick.
But I think the most important thing to come out of this is ask the questions.
Hmm.
Where am I? Who is this? What rules potentially apply? What's the context? Union, not union, Texas, California, wherever. And then, one of the, and what are the dangers of doing it wrong? California misclassification can be a $5,000 to $25,000 penalty per employee.
Right.
So it can be very expensive to get it wrong.
Yeah. What I'm shocked at, John, is how come there's so many, if the rules are so strict about not having independent contractors, how can there be so many million independent contractors? It seems.
Well, the rules are becoming more strict.
Okay.
It's, and it's state by state. And the number I gave you, that 64 million, was nationwide.
Hmm.
And then you have states like California that look at it as employers shirking their responsibilities. And that's the assumption that the state legislature in California has as to why an employer would make a worker an independent contractor versus an employee to get out of benefits, to get out of taxes. I see Warren's raising his hand.
Go for it.
Yeah, John, thank you. in California, Massachusetts, and many states in between, the whole challenge of Uber, Lyft drivers being employees, independent contractors, et cetera, and given all the comments you made, very, very specific, how are the different states being effective in legislating Uber drivers, Lyft drivers? And, you know, we have a huge issue here brewing in Massachusetts. I know some of the proposed legislation patterns after what California has passed. But from your perspective, how does that independent contractor status weigh in for folks like Uber and Lyft drivers?
Well, I think it has to be a state by state, you know, process similar to a Prop 22 or whatever they're trying to do in Massachusetts. I mean, one of the issues that just came up and there was an en banc, which means the whole Ninth Circuit, which is the Western United States, the federal courts, looked just on Monday, issued an opinion. There was a constitution, Uber and Lyft and a couple of employees made a constitutional challenge to AB 5 because under AB 5, Uber and Lyft drivers have to apply to the ABC test. Yet there's certain types of things. There's this dog walking service that they compared themselves to, which I had never heard of before, but apparently you can, it's sort of, the dog walking service actually advertises we're Uber for dog walkers. So apparently you call them up and they go and walk your dog. I don't know if anybody's here to use them, but it's similar to, you know, and the Uber and they're not part of AB 5 by statute. And they then fall into a different 10-part test to determine whether they're independent contractors or not.
Wow.
And Uber and Lyft said, what's the difference? We're the same thing. And court, Ninth Circuit found, and a lower division or a panel on the Ninth Circuit said, you can't change that. They're different. And the Ninth Circuit said just on Monday, well, the state could see them as different. I mean, in fact, even the fact that they call themselves the Uber of dog walking means that Uber is a bigger thing than this dog walking service, and the legislature can look at them differently.
Wow.
They just have to have some sort of rational basis, and they assume the legislature had one. But it's until there's a legislative solution, and I think it's going to have to be state by state. This is going to be a constant problem. I mean, Uber and Lyft and Postmates, they base their business model on the independent contractor. And, you know, in California, we had a proposition. It was probably the most expensive proposition on our last ballot, you know, and it's Uber and Lyft are fighting about independent contractor versus employment. And it ends up as something that they're going to make, you know, average citizens, where you're dealing with these tests, which have 10 different factors, and you have to look at all these different things to try to figure it out. You know, it's my problem with the California system, but it is it's going to be difficult, you know, and either maybe you could create some sort of national policy that's going to apply to Uber and Lyft, but even that's going to have issues. It's just a new,
Thank you.
and it's not new. I don't really think, at least I personally don't think that.
Well, thank you, John. Peter?
There we go. There's that mute button. Yeah, and Forrest, to kind of circle back to your question about, you know, why does this happen in the life? You got to remember, the employee, the individual who's involved in this, oftentimes is perfectly happy with the situation. I mean, you know, when I was 13 and 21, I carried golf bags. I got paid cash under the table, never paid taxes, never saw a 1099 on it. And, you know, I look back on that every day, every other job I've got, and said, you know, I had it pretty good back in the day. A little bit of sweat, a little bit of whatever, but, you know, And in some cases, yeah, it's short-sighted to be thinking, oh, you know, I don't pay taxes up front, or maybe I don't pay pennies, but maybe I do better, you know, from other perspectives. And I get that, but, and I'm not saying everybody should be independent contractors, but there is certainly, you know, you can't discount, you know, within the population, a lack of love for the government, the lack of love for regulation, lack of love for being taxed. And it's certainly, you know, if you put your blinders on and squint and whatever, it seems a lot easier to say, yeah, I'm a contractor, just pay me cash on the barrel, and I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I used to have 30 golf professionals that worked for me at a company called Golf Tech. And I remember we had to convert them all from independent contractors. They're all in California over, and they were not happy. We were not happy. It was bad for everybody. But I just want you guys to know that during the morning I caddy for a living, because that's the highest return on investment I could have in my time. So if you guys need a caddy, just give me a call. I'll come on. I'm pretty good. I mean, I don't read the putts perfectly, but fairly well. So John, thank you for the
Let me just respond to Peter, only because
yeah.
I grew up in the Chicago area. I think you're from Chicago. I grew up in the Chicago area, was also a caddy all through junior high and high school, and like you, had cash. And I think the state would look at it a little differently. They would say, that's nice that you liked having cash in your pocket and you liked being able to show up at the caddy shack and not show up on Tuesday because you didn't want to work. Except, like you, it never occurred to me that I had some obligation to actually keep track of how much money I was making, pay my taxes. And in hindsight, because like you, the statute of limitations has long since run on that, I was cheating the government. So were you. We cheated the government out of a lot, not maybe, well, collectively as caddies on the North Shore of Chicago, you know, I'm sure we cheated the government out of hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential tax revenue. And I could see the government saying, you can like it all you want, but the only way we're going to get paid is if there's employment withholding taxes, and we're not going after a bunch of 16-year-old kids who make $1,000 in the summer.
Yeah.
But
Great. Well,
I think that's the issue.
I now know where I can find employment lawyers, future employment lawyers. They're all caddies.
We're all caddies.
Right.
So I want to wrap up just for a second. I put the link in there. If you guys haven't already seen this, this is our page for this particular group. Here is kind of the basic aspect of it. It's $450 a quarter. It's not included in your Highrise membership. This is a separate membership. We're going to keep it relatively small, 10 to 15 members. We are going to get some more industry folks. I'm reaching out to HR managers, folks that are actually in-house. My goal is to have some of those folks here as well. Here's some of the basics. And if you want to see the traditional agenda, you can go down to the bottom here. It's relatively similar to what we did: intro roundtables, mastermind, knowledge transfer. We might have some breakout rooms occasionally. But if you're interested in moving forward, just let me know. I know a few of you are asking yourselves, well, how many employment lawyers are we going to have in this group? The way I look at it is that we're not going to want, you know, a majority of the folks being employment lawyers. But if there's a couple of employment lawyers, you guys can confer with each other. You can come up with some ideas. You might come in and talk about receivable management, client issues, things of that nature. It's really not a problem to work with other people that are in the similar industry. It's just a matter of deriving good ideas, good input, and coming out of here learning something. And I'm hoping that today everybody got something out of this, and it's only going to get better as the group forms. So if you have any questions, if you'd like to join, please do. If you want to, I'll be reaching out to most of you in the next couple of days. If you have any, want to schedule a call, we can do that as well. But thank you all for being here for the first meeting. I appreciate all the input and look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Forrest. Have a good day.